Alright, so I'm Jeremy Posey. I'm the project manager for Middle Tennessee State University's Formula Hybrid this year. And I'll be going over with you kind of the evaluation of our methods for project management this year, how we thought we were going to do, and how we did. We'll start with an agenda. First we'll go over the scope, what we plan to do when we set out to do this. We'll glance over our project structure, how we organize this to try to get to that end goal. The milestones we use to measure our success along the way to try to keep us on track. The change management process, that was a big one that was focused on in the instructional videos that you provided. Turned out to be a good thing because we used it frequently. And then our conclusions, what we learned from this switch to the project management. So our scope, our team is entirely brand new. We've never done Formula Hybrid before, so our scope is a bit wider than most teams. Most teams that are already existing focus on the middle one here, designing the fabrication of the cars. We actually at the onset only had 2 members and had to go find a team. So the scope was to find a team. We set out to have at least 10 members. We did the calculations, tried to figure out the manpower it would take, and found that 10 members working 15 hours a week would be the bare minimum that we would need to get this project done. We need good members. We need people that are successful in school. School comes first, even though this is a student project. So we needed people that had a minimum GPA of 3.4. They knew what they were doing in class and could apply that knowledge in a competitive setting. And then we wanted, again, the time consideration. Good students that had the free time to spend in our lab. Once we had a team, we set out to define the performance parameters. This is racing. We wanted a car that could go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. That could be pretty easy in this setting, should be. Car that was capable of 90 miles per hour, had very good lateral grip, 1.2 Gs, and had a race efficiency, endurance race efficiency for the combustion engine, 20 miles per gallon is what we were shooting for. With those performance benchmarks set, we moved on to what everyone else starts with. The design, fabrication, assembly, testing, and competing with the vehicle. Those, we wanted to get all the CAD renderings done by our members before we started in on the assembly. We needed to fabricate as many of the components as we could in-house. Our school specifically focuses on hands-on learning. We're an engineering technology school, and so hands-on is really big for us. We wanted to fabricate as much as we could in-house, fabrication and machining. Test all of our data once we had a running vehicle with data logging to ensure that we could compare those numbers to our original benchmarks that were set before coming to competition, and then come to competition in 2015. The structure we used to try to get there, we gathered our core members and we set up a project charter. We used the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, to kind of guide us through this. We're all new at this, so that was our Bible for this project management. We set up by first getting the key members in and going over the rules. We needed to know the rules intimately before we could even define where we wanted to go. So we read over those, studied them for weeks, had meetings every couple of days. A lot of confusion. We all interpreted it slightly differently, so a lot of discussion there. And then once we kind of understood the rules, we looked at the points breakdown and said, well, let's play to our strengths. Where could we gain the most points? And kind of let that guide our design. From there, we went and created a statement of work. We kind of joked around. We did the roll cage connected to the control arm and the control arm connected to the upright. We kind of played that game all the way through, trying to find every little nut and bolt that had to be done on the car to give us an overall picture of what the work that needed to be done was. With that knowledge, we developed our work breakdown structure. We take all those statements of work and find out, well, what has to be done before what, and what can we do at the same time, and we try to structure that and create a timeline that would allow us to reach completion in the time we had. We actually used Microsoft Project for ours. It was free, provided to us, and so that's what we utilized. Project team organization. We have me, Jeremy Posey. I'm the project manager. A couple of guys that will be up here today to answer some questions for you in the Q&A is our mechanical team lead, Daniel Morgan here. Our electrical team lead, Zach Hunter, couldn't be with us, but our integration team leader, Robert Johnson here, he's with us as well. And then our work breakdown, the organization of that, it's not as big as we would like, but we had the design of the car, the manufacturing, testing and improving the car, and then transport to competition. We broke each one of those things down here. They're broken down to the 4th level on work breakdown structure. In some places, in order to try to get it down to a 10-hour or so work package, we broke those down all the way to the 6th level. Just some were that difficult. Once we had that work breakdown structure completed, we were able to go in and try to assign resources, both human resources and parts and equipment, machining time, assign those resources based on work breakdown structure, and that's where the project software really helped with that. Expected results. So we set up major milestones along the way to kind of help guide us and see if we were on schedule with that work breakdown structure. We started with really big ones. When we get the initial design and all the calculations on the electrical side done, that's a big milestone. Same thing with completing the fabrication of the main chassis, moving on to a rolling chassis with suspension and brakes, doing all the testing on the electrical side on the bench, big milestones like that, and of course a completed vehicle. The problem we found with that was that those milestones ended up being weeks and weeks apart from one another, and so we'd run up and be on top of one and realize we're still pretty far away. What's causing that? And so we started setting up some small milestones within the others to help us keep track of that. So for the completion of the designs, we'd set up subsystems in that. So once the suspension is designed, that's a milestone. We know we're there. Brakes are designed, that's a milestone. And the same thing with fabrication. We do just the driver's enclosure. That was a small little milestone. Front and rear main hoops for the roll cage, that was a small milestone. And by doing that and putting all those small little milestones, it increased the resolution of our tracking. We were able to track it a lot more frequently. And it kind of helped motivate the members as well, because instead of going weeks between little successes, we were going days, and we're constantly knocking things out. Change management. This was a fun one. So there was a lot of change. We set up a process wherein any team member could submit a change. We actually had little change forms that they would turn in to their team leader. We had weekly leadership meetings in our lab for the Formula Hybrid, and so the team leaders would bring those change forms, and at the end of our meeting we would cycle through each one of them, and we would have just the team leaders and then any of the members that actually do the assembly or design work. If they were affected by the change, we'd bring them in as well, get their input. Once the form was submitted, we kind of go in and we weigh what it's going to cost us in time, what it's going to cost us in resources, and like we explained, if we wanted to increase the quality of our Formula Hybrid in the same amount of time, then cost would go up. And we always did that with each one of them. If you move two of them, one of them's got to change. And so we ended up doing a lot of this, trying to weigh what we could change and how it would impact our schedule and our manpower. With that knowledge, if one got approved, if we found that it would affect us and we could live with it, if we could live with those changes, then what we would do is we'd go ahead and approve that change. When we did that, the work breakdown structure and the statement of work would be changed that day. The person in charge of updating them made it happen the same day. Any drawings that needed to be changed and the change forms themselves would be logged away so that we could keep up with them and not lose them. Lessons learned. Man, going for a long time. Project management in theory is really easy. We read through the PMBOK, and even though it's massively thick, it all seems pretty straightforward. We read through it and go, okay, we do this, and then you do that, and then you do that. In practice, it was not that easy. It was much more difficult. I can see why people in the industry, like that's their entire job, is project management. I can understand that now. Before this, I thought that was just a thing they did on the side. No, it is a full-time job to try to manage projects this large. Project constraints weren't where we thought they'd be. When we went into this as a brand new team, we thought that cost was going to be our biggest constraint. In reality, it turned out to be manpower. We originally did our project plan over the break between semesters, and guys were putting in tons and tons of hours. So we made a project plan and work breakdown structure thinking we were going to continue that rate of work, and then the semester hit and it all ground to a halt. So now we're a little more realistic on our timeline forecasting. We take into account the breaks, and then when we're during the semesters, we even adjust it for finals. And that's something we'll carry on into future years. And then the work breakdown structure is definitely your friend. We would get so busy building the car that we would drift away and not check on it for a while. We paid for that big time. So in the future, we're going to make sure that there's someone responsible for constantly keeping up with that work breakdown structure. Any questions?
Well done.